Hello everyone and welcome back. Let's adjust this real quick. This is S.C. Coleman, author. In this video I'm going to be talking about some very strange, highly treasonous, but very interesting activities. So we're going to do something a little different. Well, it's not that different. In order to get an understanding of the perspective that we're dealing with here, we'll start out by jumping to a particular section in one document, and later we will return to that document because there's one section in this document that provides us the perspective that we're looking for in understanding who exactly we're dealing with here, the perspective that they hold. And all of these pieces will all form together, sharing that singular perspective. The first thing that we need to understand here is that even though this clause is not labeled as such, it is the force majeure clause, of which the definition for that has been changed. The concept of force majeure or major force is that somebody, through no fault of their own and with no logical, reasonable, rational, or feasible capability to continue with their activities, is put out of that activity by superior force. A good example of this would be, say you have somebody who's working at an office building and they have about 500 people in that office building, a couple dozen guards or so, and the entire building gets overrun by 10,000 people, and all of the people who work there are thrown out and the whole place is taken over by superior numbers in that case. But superior force can come in many different ways. It could be capabilities that are more advanced so as to make the force superior to that which can be leveraged in the defense of the other individual. So it's very interesting where you have to have force majeure clauses in contracts, because logically speaking, if you can't do the job, you can't do the job. And it doesn't matter anything else beyond that. You cannot feasibly, physically, in reality do the job, right? Well, that's the whole point of them trying to change the force majeure clause. They are in fact attempting to eliminate the reality of having superior force brought against them, and they don't even want to recognize the fact that that's even possible. That is the level of arrogance and delusions of grandeur that we're looking at here. So let's go ahead and read it in their words. Excusable delays. Isn't that nice? That's a nice way to rewrite force majeure. The contractor shall be liable for default unless non-performance is caused by an occurrence beyond the reasonable control of the contractor and without its fault or negligence, such as acts of God or the public enemy. Who writes like that? Acts of the government in either its sovereign or contractual capacity. Fires, floods, epidemics, quarantine restrictions, strikes, unusual severe weather, and delays of common carriers. The particular part we should read again is that any occurrence beyond the reasonable control of the contractor and without its fault or negligence, such as acts of God or the public enemy. What are acts of the public enemy, and who is this public enemy they're referencing? And then we have acts of the government in either its sovereign or contractual capacity. That is certainly strange. What's stranger, that we'll find out later, is the type of document that that type of language is attached to. So to start out, now that we have that absolutely bat crap crazy perspective that these individuals hold, treaties and other international acts series 07-618, defense cooperation, memorandum of understanding between the United States of America and other governments, signed at Paris June 14th and 18th, 2007 with annexes. This is from the Department of State. Note by the Department of State pursuant to Public Law 89-497, approved 8 July 1966, blah, blah, blah. Treaties and other international act series issued under the authority of the Secretary of State shall be competent evidence, as the case may be, therein contained in all the courts of law and equity and of maritime jurisdiction and in all the tribunals of public offices of the United States and the several states, without any further proof or authentication thereof. Well, isn't that nice? That's definitely not constitutional. Entered into force June 18th, 2017, and that's treason. And we're just going to find out that there's just iotas of mountains of treason going on here. Memorandum of Understanding among, I'm not even going to bother with these whole lofty titles that they like to declare. We've got France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, and of course the United States. I hereby certify this to be a true certified copy of both the English and French language Memorandum of Understanding, since there's a French one. Office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Defense Exports and Cooperation. Armaments Corporation Division maintains a custody of a signed copy of the MOU, and this was signed Laura McMahon, Deputy International Agreements. Yeah, like that means anything. Jeez. Stuff's stupid. Having a common interest in defense, blah, 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 have reached the following understandings. Definitions. The participants have jointly decided upon the following definitions for terms to be used in this MOU, and I, of course, highlighted the ones that are important for exactly what type of activities they're agreeing to. Classified information or material, official information or material that requires protection in the interests of national security. They love that little cover identity story to engage in treason and active war on the population, and is so designated by the application of a security classification marking. This information may be in oral, visual, magnetic, or documentary form, or in the form of equipment or technology. Controlled unclassified information. Unclassified information to which access or distribution limitations have been applied in accordance with applicable national laws or regulations. It includes information that has been declassified but remains controlled. Isn't that nice? So declassification remains controlled. Now I've got here a note that this is relative to foreign control in the United States, and we are in fact engaged in exactly this right now. Cooperative project personnel. Military members or civilian employees of one participant assigned to one or more of the other participants who perform managerial, engineering, technical, administrative, contracting, logistics, financial planning, or other functions in furtherance of a SNRA activity. So we're talking about anything from attorneys to construction workers. There's just a long list of possible positions in society and tasks that they're doing, and they're all doing it under the name cooperative project personnel. Like, that's not big. It doesn't say anything about being foreign. Defense purposes. Manufacture or other use in any part of the world by or for the armed forces of any participants. Designated Security Authority, DSA, a security office approved by national authorities to be responsible for the security aspects of this MOU. Host participant. Now, I think it's funny that they use the word host, because that is exactly what they use for the term of parasites, except for what's interesting is that a host of a parasite is a host of something for a site. So the host is the site. So when you say host of parasite, you're saying host for a site, because para is for, and then site is a place. So that's sort of weird, because technically a parasite, if you divide it up into the two words, is not really an object, entity, living creature, or anything like that. And it's almost redundant. Host participant, the participant whose nation serves as the location of the CPP, which again is a cooperative project personnel. Participant, a signatory to this MOU represented by its military or civilian personnel. Participant is a signatory to this MOU represented by its military or civilian personnel. So again, remember the definition we just read about the sovereign authority or contractual authority of the quote-unquote government. And the fact that they're representing the government as a separate individual entity which is represented by employees. That is not the constitutional republic. That is not a government. That is the overlord, the Ubermensch of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's a really boring book. Parent participant, the participant that sends its CPP to a location in the nation of another participant. Look how they always talk about individuals like or people, they're like their property, and the only ones that are of any significant are the employees, which always represent this non-existent corporate organization. And they all talk like that. Third party, a government other than the government of a participant, and any person or other entities whose government is not the government of a participant. So what's interesting about this entire definition structure, the perspective in it at all, is that it doesn't even recognize individual human beings. It does not recognize the rest of us. And in the context of this document, you would have to assume that we are in fact a fourth party, because their definition of a third party only includes other governments or other personnel of those governments. They don't even recognize we the people or humans, and they always love to laugh at that phrase, we the people. They love laughing, they always like laughing, snickering and stuff. The objective of this MOU is to establish a comprehensive framework for the participants to define and establish the general principles that will apply to the initiation, conduct, and management of cooperative research and development, testing, and evaluation projects, to include advanced concept technology demonstrations concerning interoperable military equipment. And of course, they're making that super wordy because they are in fact talking about something that is highly treasonous, very criminal, and evil. Scope, loss of control. Participation in all SNRA activities will be open to all participants. If any one participant does not wish to or is unable, there's your force majeure, to participate in any SNRA activity, this does not preclude the other participants from entering into that SNRA activity. Okay, so let's take an example here. Say you have cooperation in the United States among these so-called foreign governments. And the United States decides we're going to pull out, we're not going to continue the activity. These other countries will continue with their people in that country and continue operating that activity. That is what this is saying. This has to do with retention of control under, as it says, when it's unable to participate. Because the regular population in the United States has woken up to what's really going on, and they decide to kick out all the little criminals and traitors and reestablish the constitutional republic, the true government. Then the participant will be unable to act in this capacity because they will no longer exist. Computer databases, computer software, or computer software documentation associated with weapon systems may be transferred under this MOU in accordance with national procedures subject to the following limitations, and that's treason. Such transfers may occur only when necessary or useful to the conduct of the SNRA activity as determined by the providing participant, and where knowledge gaps are identified or questions arise regarding the specific area of interest. SNRA WGs, WG stands for working group, by the way, they mention that later, may be formed. The purpose of an SNRA WG is to exchange information for the purpose of defining and resolving specific issues as directed by the SC. Familiarization visits may occur in accordance with Section X, visits to establishments to promote awareness of each other's facilities and to identify potential cooperative opportunities. I think we know what that means. This MOU will be directed and administered on behalf of the participants by a steering committee, SC, working groups, WGs, as necessary, and project officers, POs, appointed by PA participants in an SNRA PA. That's fun. Meeting locations will be rotated, with each hosting participant providing without charge appropriate meeting facilities including security and administrative support. Sounds like they don't want to be found. All decisions of the SC will be by unanimous consent of the participants concerned in the SNRA activity. The SC will consist of the following or their designees, or in the case of reorganization, their successors. Délégation Générale, Délégation Générale pour l'Armement, Direction des Systèmes d'Armes Ajoutés, France, of course. That didn't sound like French. German is the Bundesministerium der Verteidigung, which has a address of a P.O. box. That's fun. Italy is the Direttore Generale della Direzione Generale degli Armamenti Terrestri, which is basically the same name as the one I just read in French. Director of the Directorate, Capability Integration Army, Ministry of Defense UK, and the Office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Defense Exports and Cooperation. That's what a bogus thing that is, right? The SC will be responsible for the following: exercise oversight of this MOU, providing recommendations to the participants for the addition of new participants in accordance with Section 14, that's XIV, X-ray India Victor, right, the Roman numerals for 14, additional participants. Monitoring third-party sales and transfers in accordance with Section 12, third-party sales and transfers, and I bet you anything that a lot of that has to do with firearms in the United States. The third-party sales and transfers. Of course, in here they only define third-party as other governments. So I think an example would be the transfer and sale of firearms from Brazil to the United States would be in fact monitored by all of the quote participants. If a participant finds it necessary to exercise a restriction on the retransfer of export controlled information as set out in paragraph 8.2 section 8, disclosure and use of information will properly inform the other participants. If a restriction is then exercised and an affected participant objects, the participant's SC representative will promptly notify the other participants' SC representatives, and they will immediately consult in order to discuss ways to resolve such issues or mitigate any adverse effects. That's called collusion and conspiracy. Work to be accomplished under this MOU may be accomplished by specific WGs established by the SC. WGs will normally consist of representatives of the 5 participants. The chairmanship of each WG may rotate, and the meeting locations may rotate among the participants. Responsibilities: establishing and coordinating a subgroup of experts to convene if required for a specific task. They always love to just continuously expand, constantly adding new names and titles and groups and committees and other nonsense. For each SNRA PA, each PA participant will appoint a PO. The POs will meet as necessary. All decisions of the POs will be by unanimous consent. The POs will have the following responsibilities: developing and implementing approved transfers of equipment and material. What's funny is all this stuff could be in fact automated and being run through a computer system. Skynet, if you will. Section 5, financial arrangements. Each participant will promptly notify the other participants if funds are not available for or adequate to carry out an SNRA activity, and will immediately consult on the course of action to be taken. The PR participants may contribute their equitable shares of the full cost of such SNRA PAs and financial or non-financial contributions needed for such SNRA PAs. The host participant will bear the following costs: travel and subsistence, costs in connection with the performance of any duty carried out pursuant to requirement of the host participant, costs incurred as a result of a change in location of work ordered by the host participant during the period of assignment. If all participants determine to run a competition, sources from any participant's industries will be allowed to compete on an equal basis for such contracts. Compete. Each participant's contracting agency will insert into its prospective contracts and require its contractors to insert in subcontracts provisions that satisfy the requirements of this MOU, including Section 8, disclosure and use of information, Section 9, controlled unclassified information, Section 11, security, Section 12, third-party sales and transfers, and Section 17, general provisions. Each participant will legally bind its contractors to a requirement that the contractor will not retransfer or otherwise use export-controlled information furnished by another participant for any purpose other than the purposes authorized under this MOU. The contractor will also be legally bound not to retransfer the export-controlled information to another contractor or subcontractor unless that contractor or subcontractor has been legally bound to limit use of the information to the purposes authorized under this MOU. Export-controlled information furnished by one participant under this MOU may only be retransferred by another participant to its contractors if the legal arrangements required by this paragraph have been established. That's a mouthful. And of course, as usual, these participants are in fact being directed or instructed on how they will be operating as by someone else, obviously, pretending like they're agreeing to this, right? This is written by someone else, and they are in fact directing or telling the quote participants what they're going to do. They're like orders, right? Not voluntary. Equipment and material transfers, Section 7. For the purpose of carrying out an SNRA PA, each PA participant may transfer in accordance with national procedures to the other participants such equipment and material identified in the SNRA PA as being necessary for the corresponding SNRA project. While such transfers may be based on the principle of reciprocity, exact item-for-item exchanges are not required. Now, here's something that jumped out to me. This seems like the reason for the ridiculous crap that I had to deal with and others had to deal with in the military, specifically Marine Corps, in relation to Central Issue Facility or CIF returns being supply, right? Where you go to supply, you get your equipment, and then you have to return it. And they are so crazy about it. They won't let you keep your canteens, they won't let you keep your body armor, your plate carrier, none of it, right? And you know that stuff's gonna get destroyed or disposed of or something like that, probably. But this clause right here, this section, actually seems to explain the reason for that ridiculousness that we had to go through with CIF, where older generations got to keep their equipment. They were issued their equipment, and their equipment was theirs to be with them and stay with them. We didn't have to, give back the bloody and damaged and torn up, plate carrier that then when they got it in CIF, not in perfect condition from when it was issued, we have to foot the bill for the whole thing from our paycheck, which is already really tiny anyway. Unless the providing participant has consented that the transferred equipment and material may be expended or otherwise consumed without reimbursement to the providing participant, the receiving participants will return the equipment and material to the providing participant in as good condition as received, reasonable wear and tear accepted, or return the equipment and material and pay the cost to restore the equipment and material to such condition. If the equipment and material is damaged beyond economical repair, the receiving participants will return the equipment and material to the providing participant unless otherwise specified in writing by the providing participant, and pay the replacement value as computed pursuant to the providing participant's national laws and regulations and procedures. If the equipment and material is lost or stolen, the receiving participants will issue a certificate of loss to the providing participant and pay the replacement value as computed pursuant to the providing participant's national laws, regulations, and procedures. Well, that's a really awful paragraph there. The providing participant at its expense will deliver the equipment and material to the receiving participants at the locations mutually approved. Responsibility for the equipment and material will pass from the providing participant to the receiving participants at time of receipt. Any further transportation is the responsibility of the receiving participant. The participants will ensure by all reasonable means the protection of intellectual property rights in equipment and material and associated documentation. Section 8, disclosure and use of information. Disclosure: each participant upon request will disclose to the other participants any information provided. Such information may be made available without incurring a liability to the holders of proprietary rights. Disclosure: each PA participant upon request will disclose to the other PA participants any government background information. Such government background information may be made available without incurring liability to holders of proprietary rights. Foreground information generated and delivered by the contractors will be disclosed without charge to all PA participants. If a PA participant intends to use any jointly generated foreground information in a sale or other transfer to a third party, the provisions of Section 12, third-party sales and transfers of this MOU will also apply. Proprietary information: all unclassified NSNRA information subject to proprietary interests will be identified and marked and will be handled as controlled unclassified information. Where a participant owns title to an invention or has the right to receive title to an invention, that participant will consult with other participants regarding the filing of a patent application for such intervention. Now here's the kicker. The participant which has or receives title to such invention will, in other countries, file, cause to be filed, or provide to the other participants with the opportunity to file on behalf of the participant holding title or its contractors as appropriate patent applications. Did I? Yep. Oh, darn it. There we go. Got the page numbers backwards. Patent applications covering that invention. If a participant having filed or caused to be filed a patent applications decides to stop prosecution of the application, that participant will notify the other participants of that decision and permit the other participants to continue the prosecution. That doesn't seem right. The other participants will be furnished with copies of patent applications filed and patents granted with regard to inventions. The other participants will acquire a non-exclusive, irrevocable, royalty-free license to practice or have practiced by, on, or behalf of the participant throughout the world for defense purposes any invention. That's ridiculous. Patent applications to be filed under this MOU, which contain classified information, will be protected and safeguarded in accordance with the requirements contained in the NATO Agreement for the mutual safeguarding of secrecy of inventions related to defense and for which applications for patents have been made, done in Paris on September 21st, 1960, and its implementing procedures. Section 10. Visits to establishments. Each participant will permit visits to his government establishments, agencies, and laboratories and contractor industries facilities by employees of the other participants or by employees of other participants' contractors, providing that the visit is authorized by all participants involved. All visiting personnel will be required to comply with security regulations of the host participant. Any information disclosed or made available to visitors will be treated as if supplied to the participants sponsoring the visiting personnel and will be subject to the provisions of this MOU. Requests for visits will cite this MOU and the appropriate SNRA PA as the basis for the request and will be submitted in accordance with the International Visit Request Procedures.
Hi, Dad.
Section
Tell
11.
what my name.
Section 11, Security. Classified information or material will be transferred only through official government to government channels or through the channels approved by designated security authorities, DSAs, of the participants. Such classified information or material will bear the level of classification, denote the country of origin, the conditions of release, and the fact that the information relates to this MOU. The participants will investigate all cases in which is known or where there are grounds for suspecting that classified information or material provided or generated pursuant to this MOU has been lost or disclosed to unauthorized persons. Each participant also will promptly and fully inform the participants of the details of any such occurrences and of the final results of the investigation and of the corrective action taken to preclude recurrences. For any SNRA activity carried out under this MOU, the appropriate representative of each participant will mutually determine whether any security instructions and/or classification guide for that SNRA activity will be required over and above the provisions of this MOU to provide a mutually acceptable degree of security protection for any classified information or material provided or generated in the course of that SNRA activity. If determined to be necessary, the SNRA activity, PSI, and the SCG will be prepared as specified in Section 4, Management and Organization and Responsibilities, subparagraph 4.5.9, or subparagraph 4.6.8, and will describe the methods by which SNRA information or material will be classified, marked, used, transmitted, and safeguarded, and will require the markings for all export control classified information and material. Also include the applicable export control markings identified in the PSI in accordance with paragraph 9.2 of Section 9, Controlled Unclassified Information. Yikes. Section 12, Third-Party Sales and Transfers. Except to the extent permitted in subparagraph 12.1.2, participants or PA participants in an SNRA PO will not sell, transfer, title to, disclose, or transfer possession of jointly generated foreground information to any third party without the prior written consent of other participants, governments, or PA participants, governments, and an SNRA PA. Furthermore, no participant or PA participant in any SNRA PA will permit any such sale, disclosure, or transfer, including by the owner, without the prior written consent of the other participants, governments, or PA participants, governments in an SNRA PA. Such consent will not be given unless the government of the intended recipients agrees in writing with the participants or PA participants in an SNRA PA that it will not transfer or permit the further transfer, retransfer of any jointly generated foreground information or equipment and material provided, and use or permit use of the jointly generated foreground information or equipment and material provided only for the purposes specified by the participants or PA participants in an SNRA PA. Sales and other transfers of equipment jointly developed under this MOU and jointly generated foreground information in SNRA activity may attract a levy to be shared as mutually determined by the participants or PA participants in an SNRA PA. Prior to any such sales or transfers, the amounts of any levy and the procedures for assessing and distributing such levy will be mutually determined by the participants or PA participants in an SNRA PA, consistent with laws and regulations of each participant or PA participants in an SNRA PA. Any participant may reduce the assessment of its share of levy. Section 13, liability and claims. Now this is going to relate to law enforcement, even though it doesn't directly state that. Employees and agents of contractors will not be considered to be civilian personnel employed by a participant. And that explains to you why they will not stop trying to conflate quote-unquote law enforcement with military. While they are not the same, here it states that employees and agents of contractors will not be considered to be civilian personnel employed by a participant. So that means if you have a contractor working on a construction site, they also are not going to be considered quote-unquote civilian personnel, even though that's exactly what they are. So that's going to be confusing. With the exception of claims for loss or damage to equipment and material under Article 7, equipment and material transfers of this NRA MOU, each participant waives all claims against the other participants with respect to injury to or death of its military or civilian personnel and for damage to or loss of its property, including jointly acquired property caused by such personnel, which did not include contractors or another participant. If, however, such injury, death, damage, or loss results from reckless acts or reckless omissions, willful misconduct, or gross negligence of a participant's personnel, the cost of any liability will be borne by that participant alone. The participants will, however, mutually determine if such injury, death, damage, or loss resulted from reckless acts or reckless omissions, willful misconduct, or gross negligence of a participant. Claims from any other persons for injury, death, damage, or loss of any kind caused by the participant's personnel will be processed by the most appropriate participant as mutually determined by the participants. Well, isn't that nice? The participants will not indemnify contractors against liabilities claims by other persons. If a person or entity other than the participant's military or civilian personnel damages project equipment jointly acquired by the participants and for the cost of making good such damage is not recoverable for such person or entity, such costs will be borne by the participants in the same ratio as their financial and non-financial contributions specified in this SNRA MOU or the applicable SNRA PA. Section 14, additional participants. Mutual consent of the participants will be required to conduct discussions with potential additional participants. The participants will discuss the arrangements under which another participant might join, including the furnishing of releasable information for evaluation prior to joining. The participants will jointly formulate the provisions under which additional participants might join. The addition of new participants to this MOU will require amendment of this MOU by the participants. Section 15, customs, duties, taxes, and similar charges. The participants will endeavor to ensure that such readily identifiable duties, taxes, and similar charges, as well as quantitative restrictions on imports and exports, are not imposed in connection with work carried out under each SNRA project. Each participant will use its best efforts to ensure that customs duties, import and export taxes, and similar charges are relieved or otherwise administered in a manner favorable to the efficient and economical conduct of the work.
Mom, I'm putting my phone.
If such duties, taxes, or similar charges are levied, the participant in whose countries they are levied will bear such costs. These costs will be over and above the participant's share's cost of the PAs. If, in order to apply European Union regulations, it is necessary to levy duties, then these will be met by the EU member and recipient. To this end, parts or components of the equipment coming from outside the EU will proceed to their final destination accompanied by the relevant customs document enabling settlement of duties to take place. Settlement of disputes. Section 16. Disputes among the participants arising under or relating to this MOU or any of its SNRA PAs will be resolved only by consulting among the participants or among the PA participants in the case of an SNRA PA and will not be referred to a national court, to an international tribunal, nor. That should be nor because it will not be, so it should be nor, not or, to any other person or entity for settlement. General provisions. In the event of a conflict between the provisions of this MOU and any SNRA activity, this MOU will take precedence. The working language for the SNRA activities under this MOU will be determined by the SC. Amendment, withdrawal, termination, duration, and entry into effect. The participants will consult prior to the date of termination to ensure termination of the most economical and equitable provisions. Any participant may withdraw upon written notice to the other participants as follows: from this MOU, 180 days; from any SNRA PA, 180 days; from any SNRA WGs, 45 days. Such notification will be the subject of immediate consultation by other participants or PA participants as appropriate to decide whether to proceed on a changed or reduced basis. In the event of such withdrawal, the following will apply. The withdrawing participant will continue participation, financial or otherwise, up to the effective date of its withdrawal. Each participant will pay the costs it incurs as a result of withdrawal. Information and rights pertaining to such information received from a withdrawing participant under this MOU will be retained by the other participants subsequent to withdrawal, subject to the provisions of this MOU. So they're just going to, keep it. This MOU consists of the introduction, 18 sections, and 3 annexes, will enter into effect upon the signature of all participants and will remain in effect for 15 years. This MOU may be renewed by unanimous written consent of the participants. For the Minister of France of the French Republic, we have a signature and a stamp dated the 14th of Juin, 2007, but the stamp is unreadable, so and so is the signature for that matter, so no idea. Next, we have LTG Mauro Pescarini, Director of Land Armaments General Directorate. That's interesting, that's written in English. You would expect it to be Italian, considering it's for Italy. 18th of June, also written in English, 2007, Paris, France. Germany, we have a BG Gert Vessels. It's a weird name. 18th of June, 2007, Paris, France. And then we have the United Kingdom or Great Britain, Brig Tim Inshaw. That doesn't sound like a real person. That's weird. 18th of June, 2007, Paris, France. And then, of course, for the United States, we've got a Keith B. Webster, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Defense Exports and Cooperation. How do you have a Deputy Assistant Secretary? That doesn't sound right. 18th of June, 2007, Paris, France. Model SNRA Project Arrangement. Dated, insert signature date of SNRA MOU among insert PA participants to this SNRA PA. Full title of the SNRA project. Section 1, definitions. Section 2, objectives. Section 3, scope. Section 4, sharing of tasks. The sharing of tasks will be as follows: the French, the German, Italian, UK, US, etc. Delete as necessary is put there. It doesn't say add as necessary, it just says delete as necessary. The SNRA project will proceed according to the following phases and schedule. Now here's something that jumps out to me. As soon as I look at this page, the first thing I think of is Protocol Document 47B, Housing Resource Neutralization. Because in that, in fact, has phases. And in this, it has description of Phase 1, transmittal of feasibility report. And for the Protocol Document 47B, it was covert surveillance of target areas. Description of Phase 2, decision to proceed to Phase 3, had for the Protocol Document 47B, gradually reduce upkeep of targeted housing. And then description of Phase 3, evaluation analysis of results for Protocol Document 47B, was the relocation initiative. A final report will be prepared by the POs and transmitted to the SC 6 months before the termination date of this PA. Section 5, management. List project officers for each PA participant. Particular management procedures mention only those additional management responsibilities not covered under the SNRA MOU. Section 6, financial arrangement, financial and non-financial. Section 7, contractual arrangements if required. Section 8, list of establishments. Section 9, equipment and material transfers. Transfer of the following equipment and material is necessary for executing this SNRA PA. Approximate value at start of loan. Approximate replacement value at end of loan period. And of course they have all of the rest of the nonsense you'd expect. The providing PA participant will transfer the equipment and material listed above for the duration of blank. The providing PA participant will deliver the equipment material at blank unless another location is decided in writing by the PO. Section 10, special provisions. If required, list whatever special provisions might apply. Section 11, level of classification. Only one of the 3 following possibilities must be selected. No classified information or material will be exchanged under this SNREPA, or the highest level of classified information or material exchanged under this SNREPA is confidential, or the highest level of classified information or material exchanged under this SNREPA is secret. Section 12, entry into effect, duration, and termination. The SNREPA will enter to effect upon date of final signature and will remain in effect for blank years unless terminated by the PA participants. It may be extended by unanimous written consent of the PA participants. This SNREPA is signed XX copies in the English language and, if necessary, XX copies in the French language, each copy being equally valid. Insert signature blocks for all PA participants. A single equipment and material transfer form may be used to document transfers among participants, even if the proposed transfer will entail multiple equipment and material items being transferred among multiple participants. And on to the next page, which states Section 3, Management and Responsibilities. Each participant will establish a point of contact who will be responsible for implementing this equipment and material transfer, providing participant, receiving participant. If required by national procedures, insert the following. A test report will be provided free of charge by the receiving participant to the providing participant when blank days after the completion of the transfer period. Section 4, classification. The highest level of classified equipment and material listed in section 1.1 is insert highest classification. So that could actually be top secret, gamma, whatever, markings they want to stick on it. Responsibilities regarding security and protection against unauthorized use, disclosure, or transfer that accrued prior to the termination or expiration of the transfer period will continue to apply without limit of time in accordance with section 18 amendment, withdrawal, termination, duration of the SNRE-MMU. And of course, the other thing to keep in mind is that they can in fact diminish classification markings on various documents. They can in fact reduce something that's top secret to secret if they just simply want to, they could pretty much do whatever they want. This stuff is all just to make it appear like they're doing things above board, and I guess in their perspective they are. Annex C, cooperative project personnel. Security, the host participant will establish a level of security clearance required, if any, to permit CPP to have access to classified information facilities. Access to classified information facilities in which classified information is used will be limited by the scope of the relevant SNRE activity. As part of the visit request procedures, each participant will cause security assurances to be filed to the parent participant's embassy in the host participant's country, specifying the security clearances for the CPP being assigned. CPP assigned to a host participant's facility to conduct an SNRE activity will not serve as a conduit between the host participant and parent participant for requests and or transmissions of classified information and material or controlled unclassified information outside the scope of their assignment unless specifically authorized by the parent participant. So some of their more important individuals will be authorized by the parent participant to do that, and that's the reason why they always like to leave that at the end of the paragraph. So that way somebody reads the first part of the paragraph, assumes they know what the paragraph is going to talk about, and then moves on. And they don't read the whole paragraph and find out that at the end, it in fact is saying that they're going to do just what they just said they're not going to do. And that's how screwy these clauses are. The host participant will provide, if available, housing and messing facilities for CPP and their dependents on the same basis and priority as for its own personnel. Now here's where it gets weird. The host participant will, in consultation with the CPP, establish standard operation procedures for CPP in the following areas. Dress regulations consistent to the extent possible with the military and civilian personnel regulations and practices for the host participant and parent participant. So what that means is, if you want an example, one of these, quote, CPP people are sent to the U.S. Marine Corps. That means they are going to get dress regulations consistent to the extent possible with the military personnel regulations and practices. They're going to have dress blues, they're going to have alphas, they're going to have bravos, they're going to have fatigues, they're going to have, they are going to look exactly like everyone else. Exactly. And that's in any of these countries, of course. You take one of their CPPs and send it to Germany, well, they're going to look exactly like the German Army or the German Navy or whatever. During their assignment, CPP will not be placed in the following duty status or environments unless mutually decided by the host participant and parent participant. Duty assignments in which direct hostilities are likely. Should a host participant's facility become involved in hostilities unexpectedly, CPP assigned to that facility will not be involved in the hostilities. Wasn't that nice? They can just declare that. Hey, if you get attacked, you can't be involved. Like, what does that mean? Any such CPP approved by the host participant and parent participant for involvement in hostilities will be given specific guidance as to the conditions under which the assignment will be carried out by the appropriate authorities of the host participant and parent participants. That is a really, really weird thing to say. Really weird. Appendix 1, Certificate of Conditions and Responsibilities for Cooperative Project Personnel, CPP. I understand and acknowledge that I have been accepted for assignment to name and location of organization to which assigned pursuant to the Senior National Representative's Memorandum of Understanding among the Ministry of Defense of the French Republic, blah, blah, blah. All information to which I have access during this assignment will be treated as information provided to my government in confidence and will not be further released or disclosed to me to any other person, firm, organization, or government without the prior written authorization of the host participant. This is ridiculous, right? Who would sign this crap? When dealing with individual outside of my immediate office of assignment and official matters, I will inform such individuals that I am a foreign CPP. Yeah, somehow I doubt that. I will immediately report to my designated supervisor all attempts by unauthorized individuals to obtain classified, restricted, proprietary, or controlled unclassified information to which I have access as a result of this assignment, signature and type name, and then rank and title and date. So if that's not weird enough, just wait. Just wait. Okay. Our next document, titled Memorandum for Deputy, it's 26th of January 2023, Defense Security Cooperation Agency. Interesting name. Memorandum for Deputy Undersecretary of the Air Force for International Affairs. I highly doubt that's a military person. Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Defense Exports and Cooperation. That's the from the entity that we just read, who signed that ridiculous paperwork in Paris. Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for International Programs. Director, Defense Contract Management Agency, Director, Defense Information Systems Agency, Director, Defense Logistics Agency, Director, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Director, Missile Defense Agency, Director, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Director for Security Assistance, Defense Finance Accounting Service, Indianapolis Operations, and Director of Cybersecurity Directorate and Deputy National Manager for National Security Systems, National Security Agency. Of course, all of those are civilians. They have absolutely nothing to do with the actual military or military operations, even though they are pretending to be in charge of and working towards the ends of just that. And they wish to use the uniformed service members, as many people call them, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, etc., or Space Force now, as their cover. But these people are not military. New term of sale, credit assured payment schedules, CAPS, DSCA policy 22-47, references Security Assistance Management Manual, SAMM Chapter 9. Effective immediately, a new term of sale titled Credit Assured Payment Schedules, CAPS, is available for foreign military sales, FMS, cases with eligible FMS partners. This, of course, has to do with what we just read, pretty much, or so it would appear. CAPS offers an alternative to cash with acceptance standard term for sale for FMS partners that do not qualify for Dependable Undertaking, DU, or Risk Assessed Payment Schedule, RAPS, status. CAPS authorizes the use of payment schedules on FMS partners, LOAs, where a standby letter of credit, or SBLC, that's Sierra Bravo Lima Charlie, is established at the dollar value equivalent to the total uncollected value of all applicable LOAs and associated modifications and amendments. The SBLC demonstrates a willingness and requisite ability to make payments to the United States government for its FMS program, thereby ensuring that the FMS partners will pay the full amount of its LOAs, sufficiently mitigating USG financial risk against any losses in accordance with Section 22 of the Arms Export Control Act. ACA, as amended. FMS partners may qualify for CAPS through the provision of an SBLC from a U.S. bank with a minimum A credit rating or a foreign bank located in the U.S. with a license from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and that has a minimum A credit rating. Final determinations of bank eligibility are at the discretion of the Defense Security Cooperation Agency Financial Policy. The SBLC provided by the FMS partners must name DSCA as a beneficiary, thus providing access to funds via demand letter if the FMS partner fails to make payment. Finally, there must be a memorandum of understanding between the FMS partner and DSCA governing the relationship. These agreements must be established prior to offering any LOAs using a CAPS term of sale. Standard payment schedules will be generated by DSCA using the Defense Security System Management System, DSAMS. As CAPS LOAs or LOAs are secured by an SBLC, the DSCA CFD will work with DSCA Financial Reporting and Compliance FRC to ensure that the LOAs with CAPS terms of sale are not included in the quarterly termination liability calculations. In the event of recurring incomplete or untimely payments, DSCA reserves the right to revoke the partner's CAPS eligibility for future LOAs and issues a demand letter to the bank to fully fund all existing LOAs with the CAPS term of sale. CAPS may be used in conjunction with Foreign Military Finance, FMF, and cash prior to delivery terms of sale. If you have questions on this memorandum, please contact Ms. Trish Mansky, DSCA/OBO/FPRE/FP. 703-697-2603 or patriciamansky.civ@mail.mil. So obviously not military. Signed A. Aaron Joseph Harding. The first, 26th of January 2023 at 11:04 a.m. digitally signed. And down below it says J. Aaron Harding, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer, Defense Security Cooperation Agency. Memorandum of Understanding. The Memorandum of Understanding MOU governs the relationship between it and the responsibilities of DSCA, the FMS partner, and bank concerning the establishment, review, modification, drawing on, and termination of an SBLC. The MOU must be negotiated and signed prior to SBLC implementation. So basically, if this seems like some really hanky financial stuff that the finance cartel is known for doing, where they invent money out of thin air, basically. DSCA Office of Business Operations Country Finance Director CFD will maintain, monitor, and track the issuance, activity, and processing of all SBLC documents. CFD will toggle the SBLC indicator and enter the pay off, that's all one word, all caps, Papa Alpha Yankee Alpha Uniform Tango Hotel. Milestone and Defense Security System Management System, DSAMS, to facilitate the use of the CAPS term of sale. Implementing agency, the IA will communicate the request to use a unique payment schedule on the LOA checklist upon MIL-LAP, and subsequently upload documentation to the case tracking system for review and approval by the DSCA Case Writing Division, CWD, and DSCA CFD. In all cases, the termination of an SBLC prior to its expiration date is subject to the written consent of DSCA. That's interesting. Credit assured payment schedules, that's what CAPS is, amount 25% of the total case value. The SBLC must reflect a 75% or greater value or greater of the total case value TCV. Once the request letter, MOU, and draft SBLC are gathered, organized, and reviewed, the CFD emails are filed electronically to the International Operations Regional Execution IOPS REX Country Portfolio Director CPD. Country Portfolio Director CPD. That might get confused with the California Police Department. Well, there's no California Police Department. You could do Chicago Police Department, Columbus Police Department, Columbia Police Department. Well, whatever city has a C, basically. Requesting package review and concurrence to proceed with the CAPS approval process. Now, what's interesting here is they have the word, or the acronym, IOPS REX. That's India, Oscar, Papa, Sierra, space, Romeo, Echo, X-ray. Now, REX, as many are aware, is an old term for a king. Similar to the use of the word Regis, also meaning king. DSCA reserves the right to issue a demand letter at any time when a payment is due and there are insufficient funds available in the partner's FMS account. If there is a need to increase the value of the SBLC to support new CAPS LOAs or current CAPS LOA modification or amendments, the CFD will notify the FMS partner in writing that an increase is necessary and will allow the FMS partner 10 business days to provide an amended SBLC or deposit funds from a source outside the applicable SBLC. So that's, of course, going to be a whole bunch of money laundering.
and most importantly is a clear mechanism by which the global cartel, the globalist internationalist types, control things through funding apparatuses, and that's of course what that one is, and that's probably going to be a pretty important one. So the next document that filters in with these other two is a memorandum of understanding between the U.S. Department of State, DOS, Department of Defense, DoD, and the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. As many are aware, the USAID is a heavily propagated or talked about, it's a hot topic, about money laundering, far beyond anything that, well, I don't know about beyond anything that has involved the quote-unquote CIA, but the USAID organization is well known as being a front for criminal, internationally criminal and treasonous activity, all kinds of nasty activities that they were doing under the cover of USAID, with which, of course, the name itself is misleading because it sounds like they're providing quote-unquote aid, when in fact the USAID stands for U.S. Agency for International Development and has nothing to do with quote-unquote aid. Contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Definitions. Contract in Iraq or Afghanistan. The term contract in Iraq or Afghanistan means a contract with the Department of State, the Department of Defense, or the United States Agency for International Development. So basically, there can be no other, according to this, there can be no other contracts in Iraq or Afghanistan that do not involve Department of Defense, Department of State, International Development, or a subcontract in any tier issued under such a contract. A task order or delivery order at any tier issued under such a contract, grant, or cooperative agreement, including contract, subcontract, task order, delivery order, grant, or cooperative agreement issued by another government agency for the Department of State, Department of Defense, or the United States Agency for International Development. If the contract, subcontract, task order, delivery order, grant, or cooperative agreement involves work performed in Iraq or Afghanistan for a longer period than 30 days, private security functions. The term private security functions mean activities engaged by a contractor under covered contract as follows: guarding personnel, facilities, property of a federal agency, the contractor or subcontractor, or a third party. Any other activity for which personnel are required to carry weapons in the performance of their duties. Isn't that nice? Secretary of State is responsible for developing and implementing policies and programs to provide for the security of all U.S. government personnel on official duty in country other than those under the command of an area military commander. Yeah, that sounds suspicious. For the purpose of establishing a common database required by Section 861, the parties agree that contract information will be organized by major categories as follows. 1. Construction. 2. Architect, engineer. 3. Supplies. And 4. Services. With regard to the services category, a further subcategory will be used to list contractors performing private security functions, including those performing such functions pursuant to a contract falling within one of the other categories. It is the responsibility of DoD to establish procedures for the coordination of the movement of its contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is the responsibility of DOS in coordination with DoD and or other entities as appropriate to establish procedures as appropriate for coordinating the movement of United States government non-DoD contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan. The agencies agree that DoD's synchronized pre-deployment and operational tracker SPOT database will be the system of record to serve as a repository of information required by Section 861 of the 2008 NDAA on active and future contracts in Iraq and Afghanistan, and as appropriate contractor personnel data otherwise required by law to be maintained. SPOT will include information on all such contracts over the simplified acquisition threshold, currently 100,000 or more than 30 days. The data elements will be pulled into SPOT from the current government system of contractual records, Federal Procurement Data System Next Generation, FPDS-NG. They are, in all of these cases, extremely obsessed with information and the control of information and ensuring that nobody else, quote unquote, has access, or rather finds out about the information that is in fact being stored. The parties agree as soon as practicable to expand the common database to include information on those entities performing private security functions under major grants, including contracts under grants and cooperative agreements under which assistance is provided in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is the responsibility of DoD as the system owner to obtain and maintain certification and accreditation (CNA) of the system, maintain configuration control and data integrity, host the system, develop and provide training, and otherwise maintain the system. It is the responsibility of each agency to require contractors to input information into SPOT accurately, to require participation in training, and to assign SPOT responsibilities within the agency. DoD will provide for all basic systems operation costs and baseline training for all parties. responsibility for collection and referral to the appropriate U.S. government agency of any information relating to offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, or the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act, MAJA. DoD will collect and refer information relating to possible offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice or the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act, MAJA, by its contractors in accordance with established DoD procedures in coordination with the Department of Justice. Don't you love all of this ridiculous crap where you got a bunch of hidden hand civilians that like to leverage the entire U.S. military structure as they see fit? DOS and USAID will collect and refer information to DOJ when appropriate relating to possible offenses under applicable U.S. criminal law by their respective contractors. In those cases where the Regional Security Office conducts the preliminary investigation of a serious incident involving a contractor working under an agency subject to Chief of Mission, that sounds like CIA, authority, DOS will refer information to DOJ when appropriate related to possible offenses under applicable U.S. criminal law unless other arrangements have been agreed upon. It is the responsibility of DoD to establish mechanisms for ensuring its contractors are required to report offenses alleged to have been committed by or against contracted personnel to appropriate investigative authorities. It is the responsibility of DOS in coordination with USA to establish mechanisms for ensuring DOS and USAID contractors are required to report offenses alleged to have been committed by or against contractor personnel to appropriate investigative authorities. So, of course, they are trying to make sure these things are separate, or compartmentalized is one of the words for it. DoD and DOS will modify existing federal acquisition regulations to include instructions to USG contractor personnel performing work in Iraq or Afghanistan on how and where to report alleged offenses. Isn't that nice? Always changing things. On behalf of the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and USAID Administrator, the COMS, CCDRs, and USAID mission directors in Iraq and Afghanistan shall be responsible for implementing and coordinating execution of this MOU. In the event that issues arise under this MOU that the responsible COM, CCDR, and USAID mission director are unable to resolve, they shall promptly refer such issues to the Washington representatives designated by the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and USAID Administrator for resolution. Like I said before, these are cover identities, and these people share this cover and then coordinate themselves and provide to themselves under the cover of that identity various subcategory positions and whatnot. And that's how it functions. There is no Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, or USAID Administrator. They don't exist. They are simply cover identities for which, or offices for which, these people write the laws for themselves, essentially, and write in whatever they need or want. In the event that the Washington representatives are unable to resolve any difference or any other issue that may arise under this MOU, they shall promptly refer the matter to Undersecretary of State for Management, the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Logistics and Material Readiness, and the USAID Assistant Administrator for Management and Resolution. Now, what's interesting is material readiness here. Material is spelled M-A-T-E-R-I-E-L. That is not the appropriate spelling of the word material. All existing agreements and arrangements, however styled, between DOS and DoD and USA shall remain in force to the extent that they do not conflict with the provisions of this MOU. So obviously this thing is being alleged to be superior. In particular, the memorandum of agreement between DoD and DOS and on USG private security contractors, PSCs, in Iraq, signed on December 5, 2007, is unaffected by this agreement and continues to prescribe the two agencies' respective roles and responsibilities for inter alia movement control and coordination and the reporting and investigation of serious incidents of USG PSCs in Iraq. Now, what's interesting here is that 2007 seems to be a very important year. The first document that we read was also signed in 2007. The Undersecretary of Defense Acquisition Technology and Logistics is authorized to execute modifications to this MOU for DoD, and the Undersecretary of State for Management is authorized to execute modifications for DOS. The MOU shall remain in force until terminated by all parties. Except, they can just go in and change whatever the hell they want. So, Administrator USAID is signed, but you can't read the name there. It looks like Doug Shed or Scholl or something. March 24, 2010. Deputy Secretary of Defense, February 19, 2010, unreadable name, and Deputy Secretary of State, also unreadable name, April 7, 2010. Isn't that nice? They're always deputies or interim assistant participating, some other nonsense. So I feel like that level of evidence is extensive and connects all the dots for the appropriate picture. And there's, of course, going to be more to follow, so I guess buckle your seatbelts, right?